When you're travelling, sometimes the confidence you feel is a mask for the reality, but when you strip that away, you're left wanting. This is one time on our travels where what we knew and what we thought we knew were two very different things. Before we get into this video, I want to tell you a quick story. I was once a pretty good poker player. This was long before poker was a thing, before it became popular. I spent hours playing in dingy poker clubs and building my skills. I got pretty good. I started to win, and although there's an element of luck to poker, there's also a significantly high element of skill. And the more skilled I got, the better the winnings became. I even won 3 poker tournaments back to back in Las Vegas. I was hooked and thought I knew it all. I was a good poker player, and I thought I could hold my own. But for me, it wasn't the glitz and glamour of Las Vegas that drew me in. It was a dark and dingy poker room in Walsall, in England, frequented by all walks of life with so many stories to tell. So speaking of stories to tell, back in the 1990s, I was in that club playing in a Texas Hold'em tournament, and I ended up on the final table. Sat the opposite end of the table from me was a young player that I'd seen around there winning well against the old seasoned pros and was clearly very good. At this final table, I ended up heads up against him. Basically a showdown between 2 players. Best player wins. Then this hand came down. I was dealt my 2 hole cards. I studied them and he studied me. Then he made a sizable raise, which gave me a big decision. Do I call his raise? Well, that would be a weak decision. Or do I re-raise him all in with all my chips? Well, with nearly all my chips because I'd just eaten about 4 or 5 of them. With the cards I was holding, I would never fold. I thought about it, working out the maths and the odds. He was staring me down, but there was no communication between us, and the onlookers around the table seemed transfixed. I reached for all my chips, which were sorted, and called all in. I was committed. What happened next was a watershed moment for my entire life. Never get complacent. Never think you know it all. He stared me down and said, "You're a good player. What I need to think though is, what I'm holding, is it good enough to beat your 2 queens?" He pushed his stack into the table too, but I noticed he was eating 1 or 2 of them as he did it. I was heads up, against kings, and duly lost. To this day, it makes me think of the Albert Einstein quote, "Wisdom is not a product of schooling, but of a lifelong attempt to acquire it." It was impossible for this player to truly know I had queens, surely. But what it did teach me was that complacency will always numb you to potential hazards.
So how does what I've just explained have anything to do with slow travel?
Neil and I are so different when it comes to dealing with risk. As you know, we live our lives intentionally and we plan for everything we do. But when things go wrong, our approaches differ significantly.
Yeah, they do. The way it works is basically like this. Sarah will worry about everything and anything. Actually, give you an example of this. Before we retired, back when we were in our old corporate lives, there was a regular conversation we used to have, which we don't actually have anymore, and that was something would occur. It might be I'd say, "Oh, it looks like there's a loose tile on the roof." Sarah's immediate answer would be, "Do I need to worry about that?"
It's the right thing to do, isn't it?
And I used to keep, on Google Keep on my phone, I used to keep Sarah's worry list. And I'll pull up the worry list and say, well, currently, Sarah, you're worried about not getting the food in that we need for the people we got coming to visit this weekend. And one that she often had on there was one of her key worries, was the worry about the onset of the wasp season. So Sarah was and is a worrier. Me, conversely, I don't believe in worry. I don't see the benefit in worry. I work on the basis of que sera, sera. When something happens, we'll deal with it at the time. It's not worth worrying about ahead of time.
Obviously, however much I think my approach is best, we are a team, and over the last few weeks our approaches have been challenged and our travel plans have been stretched to breaking point.
Indeed they have. So today I've got some questions for Sarah. So we've come to a local park. We're actually in the corner of the old town of Chiang Mai here in northern Thailand. And this is a local public park. People are working out and getting their day started. It's a Wednesday morning.
We're early.
Lovely.
And there's so many people working out.
We're so early, in fact, that I've put my T-shirt on inside out.
You spotted your label at the back.
And I'm not going to be changing that because Thailand is a rather conservative country. So if I take my shirt off here, I don't want people going, "Damn Brit without his shirt on." So Sarah, I've got some questions for you. Let's find a place that we can settle down and have a little chat. Right, so we've debunked ourselves to this undercover area because, as is the way in Thailand, the rain's coming down. You don't believe me? Everyone's doing the same thing. Let me show you. There are guys practicing there. Look at the rain coming off that roof here. But just to tell people where we've been for the last month. You've not been on camera for 2 weeks. So just give people a breakdown of what we've gone through.
So the last couple, it seems like months, but it was actually just over a month. Initially, I came down with COVID, and 4 days later, Neil came down with COVID as well. So he did everything he could to isolate himself, sleeping on the sofa and things like that. And we lived separately for a few days, but you couldn't avoid it, unfortunately.
No, succumbed.
So we had that, and it was about, I think I on the 12th day tested negative, and you were 14 days negative. So we went out for 1 day to just enjoy ourselves, and the day after you said, I'm not great, I'm going straight to bed. And I thought we'd actually come back down with COVID, but in fact, it must have turned, it was another virus of some sort. We were negative, and then we had the sickness virus.
Yeah.
And after 3 or 4 days of both being really poorly with that, we decided it must be something like a parasite, so managed to get some medication for that, and that sorted us out.
Exactly.
So, but we were so weak after that. I mean, how you actually did the videos, I don't know, because you weren't great.
So when you got sick, were you worried? Because as we were talking about the fact you were a worrier, were you worried when you got sick?
Not when I was sick, because you were okay at that point. So yeah, I was okay with that.
Right. What about when I got sick? Any worry increased at that point?
Initially, no, because I knew the symptoms I had, and although it was rough, I knew you were going to be okay. However, your symptoms and certainly your cough seemed to get worse over that, so I started to worry.
So what did you worry about specifically?
That when it goes onto your chest and it's a cough, and obviously with COVID, the history that had, I was just worried that you didn't sound great at all, and felt as though my teammate was down.
Yeah.
And in a foreign country, when you're isolated, I just started to worry that you might need some medical attention.
Is there anything about my approach that worried you?
Well, you've got history, let's face it, and I think our viewers know you've got history, that you don't tell me stuff.
Yeah.
So when I said, are you okay? I don't know whether he's telling me the truth or not.
Yeah.
All I hoped is when I said, are you struggling for breath or anything, you were telling me the truth.
Yeah. So that's difficult. That's difficult. So how did my approach impact you?
Felt at one point when you were really bad and sort of 4th day into it, I felt really lonely, to be honest, and I felt for the first time I felt isolated in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And
I guess that's because, in a way, because you don't know if I'm, and I was absolutely telling her the truth, but I guess if you don't know if I'm telling you the truth about how I'm feeling, then
you'll always downplay it. That's the thing.
Always. And that's really because Sarah's a worrier, because if I say how bad things really are often, things become much worse for me, because I know I've got to deal with Sarah at that point.
When you were ill the second time, we were actually out in the supermarket, and it wasn't until we got home, Neil said I nearly fainted out there and I felt really poorly, and I hadn't spotted that.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that you don't tell me until afterwards.
So
I did feel really lonely. And although we've got a couple friends in town, I knew if I was desperate I would be able to have somebody there. But it was really the first time that I felt a bit lonely.
Yeah.
Man down.
Man down. What we were talking about in this video is about complacency. Complacency when you do anything in life. So for me, it was when I was a poker player, but when you travel. And as you're travelling, the more comfortable you get, comfortable equals complacency, really. And we need to check ourselves when that happens. So are there any ideas you've got for how we can improve on this going forward?
I think there's a number of things. Certainly sharing more of our responsibilities. So naturally, when you're in a couple, you both assume different roles, and naturally I sort of go to the house stuff and the making sure groceries are in and stuff like that, and obviously Neil does money, things like that, but I think we do a lot more than that. Just too many.
I was going to say.
No, so basically, I think we need to look at crossing over some of that and making sure our responsibilities change a little bit.
Yeah, and this is what this comes down to, really, I would say, is in the heat of the action, it's very difficult to do the right thing. So I think a takeaway on this is actually that what we should do is come up with like a cheat sheet for everything to do with financial, travel, insurance. So there's a one-stop place you go to that could guide you into different directions, and it takes the brain out of it and just gives you the information that you need.
I guess that was what was going through my mind if things had escalated where you know, it wasn't as bad as being rushed into hospital or anything, but in those moments, and we've experienced that with your parents, haven't we?
Yeah. All right. So that's it. Cheat sheet. We're going to do that. We are going to do that. Let us know in the comments if you want to share the structure of our cheat sheet. We haven't written it yet, but we need to do it. So if you're interested in it, let us know, and when it's available, we will make it available to you free of charge. So what takeaway can our viewers get from this? Anything that you can think of there? Or even more importantly for us actually.
Yeah, well, and it does go for everyone. Is comes back down to really taking our health and fitness seriously. Obviously, we couldn't help getting COVID. We've been so careful because masks were still mandatory here at that point. We've just been so careful with everything, but we couldn't help it. So, but really, we really do need to focus more on our health and fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always been a struggle for me. But the problem is that now we're retired, so you know we're getting to our mid-50s. When you get to your mid-50s, everything's just kind of going downhill. So we need to think of ways that we can arrest that decline. And if we're planning to travel for 10 years, there's so many of you guys in the comments have said to us that you were travelling but something happened health-wise which meant that you had to stop, which is really sad to hear. And we should learn from you as well. We should learn and go, right, we've got to take health and fitness
because you still think you're young, and I know when I do my working out, my knees start hurting and other stuff starts hurting, and you're like, I'm not young anymore. No. And I am young, but I'm not as young as I think I am.
I've got a inbuilt measure. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but my right knee, when I go upstairs, when I hit a certain weight, my right knee hurts, and I have to take it one step at a time. So I know when I hit that, I'm overweight.
You never told me that, but that's just what I was saying earlier. Never tell us.
Shouldn't have said that.
Although retirement can seem the easiest thing to do before you get to it, our question to you is, are you emotionally ready to retire?
Yeah, and that's the next video that we've got coming out on our channel. And it's one that Sarah wrote, so I'm looking forward to actually making that one. In the meantime, if you are interested in all of the challenges around retirement, we recommend you check out this playlist, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.